everybody. Three Geeks Conversation. I have Greg Ehrbar with me. How are you doing, Greg?
Very well, Justin. Thank you.
Good. Glad to hear it. And you're a writer, and you've done a bunch of fun things with Disney, it looks like. And I'd love to hear your story. How did you get involved with any of that stuff? How did you just jump in? Where'd you get your start?
I started writing probably when I was about 7. And I used to read to the elementary school class and create sort of plays that we didn't know how to end. So we just sat down. And I stapled together notebook paper and wrote books, really, with very crudely, but they were books. The teachers seemed to like them. And then as I just continued to do that, aside from all the other part-time jobs I had growing up. I just like to write stuff. The very first thing I ever wrote that I got money for was for an Archie comic, because they used to have the Archie Club News. And if they published your letter, you got a $5 check from the Chase Manhattan Bank, and that was the greatest thing that ever happened. And I remember waiting until August for the issue of Reggie and Me to come out. And I actually got pen pal letters from all over the world. Australia, a Vietnam vet, because this was like 69, wrote to me, and because I mentioned the radio station, that was his favorite. And so it was kind of a cool thing. And I just continued to do that. I majored in English and then in communications in college, and made a lot of little films, little animated films, little live action films. They were usually comedic and mildly satirical.
Awesome.
And what?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was just saying that was awesome. That's fun. Yeah, good.
Oh yeah, that kind of stuff. And then when I first went to Walt Disney World, I just said I want to be part of this somehow. And I always loved Hanna-Barbera, probably equally, and Rankin Bass and Filmation and all the stuff that we all grew up with. But Disney World was this place you could stand in, and big monorails went by, and there was a castle, and I couldn't believe they plopped that thing right down in the middle of Florida. And so after many years of writing letters and writing different things and all, I came into Disney and started as an hourly employee and constantly was writing even then, and eventually broke into some freelance within the company. And I wrote a lot of merchandise copy. The first thing I wrote for merchandise was a can of golf balls, Goofy's 2 for Tea. And over the years, I did a lot for attractions merchandise, the Mickey's Diner coffees and products. One of my favorites was the Wonderland Tea series, which I think they still sell. They've changed. It used to come in a lot more flavors, and it was loaded with quotes from Alice in Wonderland, which is my favorite. And the monorail set, the box copy for that, all kinds of things. There was this thing that was like you went 5 times over your lifetime or as a kid, and you put all your like receipts and stuff in it and photos. And the next time you came back, you'd list the things you did that time and how things changed. That was like a travel diary kind of thing. I think they may still make that. I don't know. And but my full-time job was working as a copywriter in the advertising creative department, and I literally worked on thousands and thousands of projects, and everything from television commercials and network specials and radio commercials, radio shows. I wrote the thing that you tune in on your radio in the car. I wrote the channels that you turn on in your hotel room, and the music that they play. Almost everything on a Walt Disney World vacation I wrote in some way. The Be Our Guest guide you got in the room with the poster inside. Menus for restaurants, names of restaurants, things like that. One of the things I came up with was, it isn't there anymore, I don't think, but for several years there was an entrance off of World Drive into the Disney's Hollywood Studios. And with an art director, Bob Krozik, we created the film strip design, and they could change out the images depending on what they were promoting at the time, and that was pretty exciting for that.
Yeah.
So whatever they gave me, I just did. And I loved writing directly for what they called affinity marketing, which was basically fans. So I wrote a lot of pass holder publications, magazines, online stories. I was the only person who interviewed Lucy Arnaz, who was in the network special when they opened Space Mountain, and she reminisced about that. Met a lot of celebrities, worked with quite a few of them. Sure. So it was a lot of fun. And you never stop being Disney. It's sort of in your blood. So I still do projects here and there, and I still feel like, in a way, I kind of represent them and care deeply about what happens to Disney.
Do you enjoy going to the parks just as much as you have? Like, I guess my question's more around, now that you kind of know how like the soup is made, does it change any type of like experience you have at the park?
Not for the parks. There, I always tell people working at Disney is like working in the Emerald City. And in Oz, there's good witches and bad witches, but sometimes you can't tell the good witches from the bad witches. And male and female, I'm not singling out any witches specifically. It's just like any place where people are gathered to do something. Most people were extraordinary people that I still keep in contact with, still do Zooms with. People I still have dreams about working with those folks, and we have a new project. We would do press events, and this is kind of it was a golden age thing, because I worked there when the first Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and Lion King and all those things were like the thing, and Disney was just hugely everywhere. And so there were press events where they would take Epcot, and it was I think the Olympics is the only thing bigger as far as what they would bring in. Thousands of press people. They would have special entertainment. They would have incredible things. And I usually was the one who either was assigned to a press person to get them to things. Most of the time I was on camera or on radio, because I can talk about everything. And so it was, and I, especially since I was a copywriter in marketing, I could talk about the latest things. So generally I was the guy they called at 3 a.m. when someone else couldn't make it. And I was, or they put you in this bullpen, and it's an area where everybody gathered. And then when they needed somebody, at a moment's notice, they would bring it in, and it was all over the world. That was very, very thrilling to do. We had a press event for Mickey's 60th birthday, probably my fondest memory, because we brought underprivileged children from all over the country. And a lot of these kids, they didn't know 3 miles away from their house. They thought their whole world was this sort of bleak thing. And so to bring them to Disney World just for a few days, and you lead in the group, you feel like Willy Wonka. You want to go ride on that? Okay, but we have to get to this photo session, and then if you do it, can we ride it again? Yay! It was really, really memorable, and I can still see the kids' faces. Some of them drew pictures, say goodbye, and seeing these kids before they got on their way, it was like, will any of this change them? I don't know. That's why I think there's Disney. I think it reaches farther than you'll ever know. And same thing about Hanna-Barbera. I think that's very different in its reach. From the late 50s until now, those are the characters that you got very close to because they were in your home all the time.
For sure. That Boomerang Channel, as a kid, I grew up with that. Like it was incredible how much fun cartoons that came out of that. Just me sitting down watching that, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they last on. There was a whole Flintstone marathon on yesterday because of its anniversary, and it was very cool. Yeah.
Oh, it's super cool. And you kind of led yourself into it. And I'd love to hear about your book, The Recorded History of Hanna-Barbera. What kind of sparked your interest in writing that? And that whole deal? Well,
I've loved Hanna-Barbera cartoons since I was little. And I grew up in the 60s and 70s through many of the changes they went through. And I was with them on those changes. I saw things that was like, gee, they don't quite look or sound exactly the same, but I was still rolling with it.
Yeah.
I love Josie and the Pussycats, and I like Scooby-Doo a lot, and I've watched every single one of the movies, and some of them are very good. I liked Hair Bear Bunch and Hong Kong Phooey, and don't get me started on the Smurfs. I've watched those. There's like 415. I've watched them many times. Droopy, Master Detective. But the thing is, just like Walt Disney, and this is what I discovered in writing this book, because I'd also written books about Disney, is that there was a parallel between the two. You know, Walt Disney's crown jewels were the first 5 animated films, because after that there was the war and the strike, and animation was always expensive. It got more expensive, and you can see a change in the 40s package films, and then in the early 50s films, everything is animated mostly on tubes. So they're still lush and beautiful, but they're not quite the same as Pinocchio, Snow White, Fantasia, Bambi, and Dumbo. And it's the same with Hanna-Barbera. When they started, they didn't even know what they were going to be. They just wanted to open a studio to stay working. And so they put way too much money into Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear, the Flintstones, the Top Cat, the Jetsons, and Johnny Quest, and even Lippy and Hardy and all Magilla Gorilla. Their early cartoons, all the way up to, I'd say 68, 69 even, were way too expensive, because television was always operating, and still does, from a return on investment. And so they were always trying to push the envelope. And a lot of people don't think of Hanna-Barbera as doing that. Yeah. Because if you compare, you know, the fluidity of Disney to Hanna-Barbera, that's not fair. But look at a Warner Brothers cartoon from 1966. It doesn't quite have that fluidity. Or the Patty Freeling from 1970, when they weren't working with United Artists anymore. Or look at a Walter Lantz cartoon from 1972 as compared to 1952. You know, the money's not there. It's what you do with what you got, which is a great Disney song. So they had great artists that made do and innovated and found ways to make these things so entertaining that, unless you're really looking at it and counting the frames, it's like, I just find this fun, you know? Yeah. And their whole thing was, it's supposed to be fun. Don't overanalyze it. It may not make sense. There may not be continuity. Wilma has 2 maiden names depending on the episode. You know, they met different ways depending on the. Those were sitcoms of those days. They didn't really have show Bibles like they have now. They didn't. People were not, even though they were syndicated, they didn't think people were going to be taking the notes they took, because animation wasn't the study back then. They just made cartoons for fun. They made them for adults. They made them for kids. And so after, you know, the shows got more and more expensive. And one of the reasons that only Flintstones lasted 6 seasons is because every year it got more expensive. And I mean, an average episode of the Flintstones could be between $75,000 and $85,000, or a 1-hour episode. I was just watching a Thriller was about $105,000. That's for 60 minutes of live action. 1.5 hour Flintstones, but you could also do a half hour of like the Joey Bishop show, which was up against Top Cat. And that's maybe in those days, maybe about 60, and Top Cat was more like 75 or 80. The Jetsons, expensive, and the most expensive of their series in primetime was Johnny Quest, to the point where Bill Hanna asked ABC, if we cut the budget, if we make some cuts, can we still stay on? By that time, ABC was becoming bigger, and they had more reach, and they didn't need to experiment anymore, you know, to get the youthful audience, and they didn't need cartoons, because if you remember the 60s, they had live action shows that were cartoons, you know, like Bewitched, and NBC had Genie and Get Smart, and they could do a half-hour cartoony kind of show that was like, you know, the Flintstones or whatever, and was outlandish with special effects. In fact, Walt Disney was doing the same thing, because Sleeping Beauty was very expensive and, as they say, underperformed in 1959. They had to lay off a lot of people. They had to make the animation cheaper in 101 Dalmatians, but they did it brilliantly. But Xerox and repeating actions and things like that. And they had to make more of the live action comedies, because the live action comedies and some of the dramas cost a whole lot less, but delivered huge. So in a way, they did the same thing. They survived. So I'm probably rambling. So
no, I love it. This is a bunch of history that like I'm not super perfect. I don't have a large purview to, but it's so interesting because to your point, I have grown up on all these cartoons, and it's fun to hear some of the context and the history of said cartoon. Speaking of that, when you were doing the research for kind of your work, your Hanna-Barbera work, was there something that really shocked you or surprised you, that like either a fun fact or something that kind of came out of left field that was surprising?
Well, that kind of stuff happens all the time when you're writing a book. In fact, the hardest thing about writing a nonfiction history,
what to include,
is not only what to include, because I ended up with more. And in fact, the University Press of Mississippi was so supportive, because it's a thicker book than they expected.
Yeah.
And they went with it anyway. I mean, I went over the word count. Plus, there's a discography in the back, which has never been published before. I thought there was maybe a couple of hundred Hanna-Barbera records. There's over 500 based on their characters. I didn't know that. And I had been collecting them for years. And the idea was using an area of the company's output that isn't usually noticed, just like with the book Mousetracks I did with Tim Hollis about Disney's records, except Disney's history is widely captured in a lot of places, sometimes good, sometimes not. You got to, be judicious with the books you read.
Yeah.
But Mousetracks covered a division. It ended up that because Hanna-Barbera really wasn't chronicled in one book from their meeting all the way up to the Scooby-Doo, the Scoob movie and the Tom and Jerry movie in 2021. I mean, beyond their lifetimes, it's almost 100 years. And it occurred to me, it's like, this story really needs to be told, and the records will be a means of bridging everything, but you don't have to listen to any of them to get the idea. Really what you're getting from the records is the point that I make, that when they had to cut back sometimes on movement, they never skimped on the soundtracks. They always had the best actors, the best music, and sound effects that everybody recognizes. So they gave you an awful lot to compensate. And the records, especially the ones that use original cast, use original music and voices, you're absent from the picture, and you're getting the full power of what that sounds like. So it's a different experience, even if it's the exact same track. It's a different experience, and I grew up loving that. And so I started out, well, I'll just do the story of their record company for 2.5 years. But it's like, well, that's a little obscure. Let's go all the way back. And the first record in the book is the Gene Kelly one, From Anchors Away.
Sure, yeah.
Which was the very first record that used their characters, And then what ended up happening was the bookend in 2021 was the Tom and Jerry soundtrack. And I interviewed the composer of that, and I found out some very surprising stories about what inspired him to completely change his major that was a surprise. The composer of that, Christopher Lennox, and he's done a lot of great movies. He was studying to be, I guess, in a group or in some kind of a pop thing. I haven't memorized every page, but he wanted to be in a different area of music, and he was going to college out here in California. And a friend of his said, "I have access to Henry Mancini conducting for a film. Would you like to come?" And he said, "Sure, it would be interesting." Well, it turned out that he was so impressed with how Mancini worked and how quickly the musicians could turn on a dime to make changes, and how when a suggestion was made, Mancini would fix it instantly and make it better. And also at that session was Joe Barbera, because the session was for Tom and Jerry the movie, which came out in 1992. And after that experience, he decided, I want to be a film composer. And he became one of the best and the biggest. And as it turns out, coincidentally, he scored the Tom and Jerry one in 2021. And he said that, and people will say, well, it doesn't sound like the Scott Bradley. Well, they weren't permitted to completely parody the Scott Bradley sound. But he got as close as he could with the jazz riffs and with the instrumentations. He was very, very conscious, because Scott Bradley's Tom and Jerry music is very different from Carl Stallings for Bugs Bunny. Bradley's music builds and then it stops before the impact, and Stallings is part of the impact. So it's a completely different system, but equally funny.
But that's all. That's such a fun fact around that. I did want to ask a little bit of Disney stuff too. And I'll pepper in some Hanna-Barbera things as well. But if I'm reading right, you did a lot of the parade stuff, and I would love to learn more about what goes on or goes into a parade, and what was your part of it, and how did that? Was it just? Well, I want to assume what goes into one of the Disney parades, the TV specials there.
It's a very exciting and a little bit, it's adrenaline pumping.
Yeah.
And back when I worked on it, it was live. I think it was semi-live. What we would do is the hosts were live, and sometimes they would throw to what they call the package, which was a videotape segment or a digitally taped recorded segment that wasn't live, but most of it was truly live. I'm not sure if they do that anymore. It seems like the program has become more of a variety show with a parade in it. This was a parade with entertainment elements mixed in, and also little tiny documentaries about the new attractions that were coming, usually starring one of the hosts or what we said, the people on the street. Regis Philbin for a long time was man on the street interviewing guests, and Regis was so great at that, and it was turned into a running gag that he was obsessed with meeting Cinderella, and they stuck him on the back of the coach once, and he's like banging his microphone, "Hey, Cinderella," because he just wanted to meet her so bad. I don't think we ever had him actually meet her on camera. It was always just the pursuit. And so by the time I got to it, we had just built the third theme park, which was at the time Disney MGM Studios. And the celebration going on in Magic Kingdom was everything had tacular in it. It was a Mardi Gras style parade with giant balloons that were so tall that we had to actually have two parades. That's what they decided to do. It's the first time they ever did it. So we had the Main Street parade with the giant Roger Rabbit and the giant Donald Duck, because they couldn't do the Christmas parade because they had to take all of the lights and garland and all that stuff down because the giant balloons wouldn't fit. So they said, let's do a second parade in the studios. And so what they did was they took the Christmas parade for the first time and ran it at the studios, videotaped it, and then I wrote commentary to match. And hosting these parades looks so easy, and it's like they're just talking heads. They're not just talking heads. They have, I was working with Joan London and Regis. Joan London was so good at what she did, and she just looked so calm. And you have to be able to back time in your head. You have to be aware of everything coming and going, and you have to be either speaking off the cuff or reading copy. The parade is scripted and it's not scripted. So I was the writer on the parade. My job was to put together the intros, welcome back, and then here comes this brass band, and it comes from Daytona Beach and all this stuff, and under the direction of, and that, let's take a listen, or oh look, it's the Pinocchio characters and that kind of thing, and And then you would put down what characters were going to be in there. And on the left side of the page, we had what we called fun facts. And that year, I didn't think they had enough. So I wrote 52 pages, and I ran them through the archive people. That's back when Dave Smith was there, and they approved everything. And what they do is, the reason there's two people is because if one says, oh, look, it's Dumbo, that's telling the other person, look at the fun facts and say, did you know Dumbo took place in Florida? Yeah, it actually was a Florida a place where they had the hiatus for that kind of thing, and bits of trivia, that kind of stuff. But sometimes I wrote Regis speak too, because I watched him. I liked Regis a lot, and I watched his show.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
And I wrote Regis speak into the thing, and I also gave photographs to them because some characters look similar, particularly King Leonidas from Bedknobs and Broomsticks and Prince John from Robin Hood. So I got an 8x10 of each, and Joan said, "Thank you. I've been dying to know which is which." That sort of thing. And it is done just like a television show, a sitcom, because there's a desk read, and everybody stands around and reads through it. You make notes. If something comes out weird or something, I'll rewrite it. Things like that. So that takes a few hours. And in the meantime, months earlier, the entertainment division is planning not only what they're going to plus the parade with, because they will add extra elements to it for television. And let's face it, this parade was made for television because Walt Disney first broadcast the Disneyland Christmas parade in 1962. And they had just started adding walk-around characters. When Disneyland opened in the 50s, they didn't have the walk-around characters, not till like 60, 61. They had those strange-looking Ice Capade, scary characters that you may have seen that come up on Facebook all the time.
Yeah,
that's what they had. They didn't make them. Well, Hanna-Barbera also started around that time doing walk-around characters, except, again, they're your friends next door. They're your buddies. So they're at supermarkets and malls and at community centers. Both, though, would go to hospitals. Disney characters would generally stay put in parks. Hanna-Barbera characters would go anywhere, but they both did a lot of hospital visits. You call out, we're actually doing. It's hard to explain, but they're there in real time. This is how we did it. In real time. Yeah. This is 91, and you can see this one on YouTube. That was I think the coolest one I did. I did several, but I think this one was cool because of the two parades. They never did it again. They would introduce it, go on the street, talk about a band, talk about a character flood, they'd call them if they were miscellaneous characters. They'd tell us who was going to be there, and then they'd go, Robin Hood was released in 1973, and it was the first film, that kind of thing. And then when a float came on, you had details about that as well. So they aren't reading and they are reading. But when they are looking at a teleprompter, it's because, and they're back timing in their head, it's because, well, there's great parade to come now. But stay tuned, because coming up, is going to be Santa and all that kind of thing. And they have to back time it so it goes right to the commercial, and then we see the commercial running, and then they count down to where we come back. When I was and plus the parade script changes constantly. So I was working all hours, the different colors, making sure everybody gets one and that kind of thing. So you don't have a lot of Christmas, activities going on, the parade activity.
Sure.
But hearing them say stuff you wrote is pretty darn fun.
Oh, it has to.
Yeah. And So that year, Mayim Bialik was actually, for the first time, was the person on the street, and she did a wonderful job because Regis co-hosted for the very first time. He was very nervous. Joan London helped guide him through it. He did a fantastic job. And I'll tell you a little funny story.
Please, yeah.
Regis had to use the restroom. and he had drank too much juice because they give them drinks, and this is a 2-hour live show. And he wanted, can I go? Can I go? And the producer kept saying, we don't have time. We're going to come back and you won't be sitting there. And so he said, all right. And, we let him out. We led them through, get people are going, we love you, Regis. We love you. Hey, how you doing? And so he got to do whatever. Then everybody gathers for a group picture. And on Monday night, he was on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And this is what Regis does. He milked the story. He made it into a Regis incident. I had to pee. And she says, no, you can't go. No, you're going to go. You're going to have to hold it. You're going to have. And it was so, and the producer thought it was hysterical. She says, he's talking about me. So that's where Regis goes, where he gets his stories from. It's just stuff like that. But he could not have been, he teased everybody he liked. He called me Gregor. Did I do it right? Did I do it right? Did I get it? Every time I had a joke, I put in a joke for him. How was that? Was that good? I'm looking at this face here,
Yeah,
so
awesome.
he was tremendous. And I have such great memories of that. But it takes more than half a year to prepare because everything in the park fits together and is very symbiotic, and especially Walt Disney World, because all of the different departments are there. And so they converge and they start creating the decorations months in advance.
Yeah.
There's a whole department, a huge warehouse for that. And that ties in with it. And they stay in contact with entertainment. And then entertainment has to decide what vehicles they're going to use, what they're going to redesign, and do sketches of that. So it's not any one thing. And then as far as the celebrity guests and the musical numbers, they may be pre-recorded. Sometimes early in December, and the annual pass holders usually somehow find out. I don't know if we let them know or what, but they want to have crowd out there. They don't want things to look sparse. So like when let's see, who do we have? We had Andrea McArdle, and we had, all kinds of people. They did a beautiful job. I wasn't on this one, but they did a beautiful moment with Jodie Benson singing Part of Your World. And she was singing it to children, and then she seemed to float, going through this like panorama. She was just floating along as she was singing, and all it was a Chapman crane. They put a seat on it, and they just moved her and followed her. But it was so magic. It was so simple. That's one of my favorite moments too. That was a little bit later. But, we wrote the segments. I also wrote interstitials. Interstitials are little promotional things or informational things between the breaks of movies and shows. When Mission from Mars was on ABC, I wrote interstitials for Jerry O'Connell and Buzz Aldrin, of all people.
That's super cool.
Yeah. And I can't find the picture. I have tried. I know they took a picture. I can't find it. Another one we did was we did interstitials for Lindsay Lohan when The Parent Trap was first broadcast.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Yeah. And her family was very nice. She was such a real person. She was very young. And we said, gee, we hope it goes well for her. We're going, I hope it. Of course, it's been back and forth, but she's a pretty tough person. She's
sure. I mean, she's on the upswing now, right? I think she's doing really, really well for herself.
She is, and I'm so glad because my kids were there. She was sweet to my kids, and there's a plush in Parent Trap named Cuppy, who was her precious thing. Well, nobody brought a Cuppy, but my daughter had a Cuppy, so we brought that one. It was in a plastic bag, and she, used that as the prop Cuppy and was very careful. My daughter got it back and all that, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And so once in a while things would be like that. And, I got to interview a lot of people and tried to ask them questions no one else asked them. I talked to Mickey Dolenz, and I said, this may be the only Disney article that mentions the movie Head in it. And that kind of thing. It was great times. I just feel very blessed. I look back on things that, and especially more than anything else, things that my children were not, though, overprivileged. We didn't, I didn't have the clout to get them ringside seats or stuff. They took what they could, but just by happenstance, sometimes some wonderful things happen. They were at one of the parades, and Bear in the Big Blue House was there. Sweet guy, Noel McNeil. And my little son got picked up by Bear to watch the parade with him. Things like that are just happenstances. Nothing like, get out of my way, I'm a VIP. I was not a VIP. I was a worker bee who was a professional. And when you're a professional, you don't go gaga. You don't get in people's faces. You stand back and you try to just do what you do. It's a different kind of thing. But sometimes people would extend themselves, and step up. You had two of my favorite people. You had Doug and Emmy Joe. On the show, and Disney made their album.
I did not. That's
their
wild.
cast album is on Disneyland Records.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, and big fan of that show, big fan of Sesame Street and Electric Company.
Yeah. They're wonderful to talk to. They're the best. I love talking with them. It was great.
And it's so wonderful to find out what genuine people they are.
Yeah. It was so. I mean, they spent almost as much time after we hung up just chit-chatting than we did talking. It was good. It was very, very
good. Yeah, and so unpretentious about it. Well, we just had this little show. We have no idea.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't turn it into this big empire, like they do now at some of these craft shows and rally shows. It's like, we had a show, and I think I saw a plush. I love that. Yeah. Well, Bob McGrath appeared at Epcot, and I had been in touch with him before because I'd had lunch with him in New York. And the reason I clicked with Bob is because he used to work for Mitch Miller. And I have a huge library of golden records, as well as Sing Along with Mitch, which are virtually the same records. And so I knew a lot of the personnel, and we talked about a lot of those people and, the music mostly. And Bob has such an incredible career. So when he came down to perform, I just stood there to say hi. And you have to have a respectable distance, Duke. Cast members, there's too many cast members, and if they all bothered people, it would be very bad. But Bob came to me and talked to me and stuff. That's okay, if they approach you. Same thing happened with Ron Dante, who of the Archies, who performed there, and we've become longtime friends. He was on an episode of my Hanna-Barbera podcast because he was the Chan Clan.
Oh, fun! Yeah.
What a terrific guy, and what a fantastic career he's had. So, that's what I mean. The Disney and the Hanna-Barbera kind of, their names were even inscribed at the Disney Hollywood Studios until only recently, because they used to have the American Television Arts and Sciences memory area, with the Mary Tyler Moore bust and the Dick Van Dyke one and on each year's honorees were listed. And one year it was William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, and they also filmed a commercial for the Tom and Jerry movie from '92 that I told you about. The Disney marketing people made a commercial promoting Tom and Jerry live at the park.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So there's been spillovers.
For sure. And I did want to ask you, because you wrote a book about one of my favorite Disney movies, or Pixar rather, A Bug's Life. What did you learn about doing that book?
Well, when you do a book based on an upcoming film, you don't have the film.
Yeah.
So you have to read the script, and if you're very lucky, get in touch with someone who's on the story or is connected with the film. That doesn't happen very often. So on A Bug's Life, I read the script, and it's a great script. Got to know what the characters are, and then I proposed any number of book ideas. And this was a series of books they sold in supermarkets. Sure. And so the idea was that, and it actually came from from a came kind of from a real life issue, because my father came home from work once, and a lady in his office had some roses, and she said, "Oh, anybody can take one home if they want." So he took one, and my mom says, "You brought me a used rose?" It was like Maud, "Walter, you brought me a used rose."
Yeah.
And it became a family joke, So it's about Flick constantly trying to please at a picnic, and he keeps messing up, And it was a lot of fun to write, but I did write it with no idea how the movie was going to. I knew it would look, because I kind of had an idea from I saw some sketches and things, but mostly it was just a script. I wrote the Tarzan comics that way, the Incredibles comics, and I wrote extra Tarzan stories back when they had Disney Adventures. I did a Rashomon kind of a Tarzan story that took place from different points of view. That was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Actually, and then for Disney Cruise Line, there was a photo album, and on the inside there was a Donald and his nephews adventure on the cruise ship, and it was drawn exactly like Karl Marx drew it. It's really, really beautiful.
That's super cool.
So a lot of that stuff I've got on my website, on the portfolio, gregovision.com. Some of that stuff I have on there. Some of the Archie stories I did, and I did a lot of comics, and a lot of a few storybooks, read-alongs, Cinderella's Christmas, and two again, Hanna-Barbera, the Flintstones and Viva Rock Vegas. The read-along was made by Disney, and so was the Grinch with Jim Carrey. It was a Disney recording, and they're the ones who asked me to do it. Read-alongs are the same thing. You get Atlantis was another one. You get a script, and that's pretty much it. And you have to guess how the dialogue is going to sound, and make a decision of what lines to put in.
Interesting. Okay. Man, that's stressful.
It was also, I wrote a young adults novel for the last Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's an instance where you have to almost elaborate without going crazy. It's a lot of fun though, because the script doesn't give you a whole lot of character. It's not a novel, so it's got the lines and the direction and some what they look like, what they might be thinking, but that's it. So you have to elaborate on, like, the pride of the admiral and his brass buttons, and he was very you have to actually add a lot. So if you've ever read those, like, as I grew up, I read the Bedknobs and Broomsticks novelization, and Cat from Outer Space, and all those. What you're actually reading is something that has been fleshed out, because the movie doesn't necessarily even have all that in there, but the author gets to do that. And that's a whole other thing. I would love to do more of those, because I had a blast doing those.
Now, how does one get that? Does Disney contact you and say, "Hey, we have a book idea, we want you to do it," or do you just kind of?
Well, it depends on the circumstances surrounding how they're handling freelance. Sometimes they're accepting it. Sometimes they have to do it internally because of budgets. There are people who know your work, and sometimes you remind them, or take them to lunch. Take people to lunch. People usually need to eat and enjoy it, and don't do it with the I want to attitude. Do it with the just chat, and you know how to reach me, and this is the kind of stuff. Do it as that. Never seem desperate or I want. They know that. They know why you're there. But somebody had Katie Lee, who's a dear lady. She's the voice of so many characters. Sunny Gummy, Gummy Bears, and she's been Connie on Adventures in Odyssey for like 30 years. And she said, "Be a friend and make a friend." That's the best way to do it.
That's a great philosophy. Yeah.
I have found that when I haven't done that, it hasn't worked. When I have done that and just establish a relationship, how you doing? Gee, that must be something to go through that. I'm doing okay, and all that, and that sounds interesting, but not not to push, it's an art form to know just how, oh, I heard this was going on. Wondered if you wanted to talk to me, that kind of thing. I mean, you can approach people. You can send an email out, but you got to consider they get kabillions of them. You can also, as you get to know a network of people, you can say, do you know anybody connected with this and who I can maybe speak to? And that, if they know you and think you're of a quality they want to pass along, they'll do that too. But you can't get all mad and huffy if they don't get back because they're busy, or the email has long gone down the fold, or whatever. You wait a respectable time. But
yeah,
it's a relationship. It's a relationship business. It really is. It's who you know, but it's not necessarily it's who you know.
Sure.
Sometimes it's it's who you know. But sometimes it's who you know, and people, like this person and they feel comfortable. I'll give you a really good, I've always loved this story. And it's why people like Betty White were always working and why people like them. Professional, on time, prepared, but a joy to have around. We were talking about Electric Company. I don't know how well you know the cast, but the first season had a certain comedian who was kind of been disgraced. But he had another show for Filmation on Saturday mornings, and he was highly respected at the time. But he left the series, and they had an opening for another versatile, performer who could sing and do comedy. And Skip Hinnant, who played Schroeder on off Broadway and played Fargo, North Dakota, and the boy in the chair, and one of the greatest things ever, Love of Chair. If you haven't seen Love of Chair, it's on YouTube.
I have not, but I'm in.
Well, it's a spoof of soap operas, but it's just this 1 minute thing. And nothing happens. The boy is sitting. The boy is getting out of his chair. Will he get out of his chair? Maybe he won't get out of his chair. And what about Naomi? I mean, every one of them was like that. It was so ridiculous. It was funny. Anyway, he was the boy in the chair. So he said on one of the DVD commentaries that a couple of people, they whittled it down to 2 performers. One guy was really experienced, maybe made a little full of himself, but really good. And the other guy was a young Cuban performer, about 20 years old, named Luis Avalos. And they decided that if they're going to be cooped up for 20 hours or more in a studio, never knowing if they're going to go home, they'd much rather be cooped up with Luis. And they made the best choice because he was so likable, he was so versatile, and he died fairly young, but he was so great as a guest performer on a comedy or something. The guy was a natural. One of his best episodes was the one where George Jefferson is going to go in the ring with him, and each one of them is being paid not to hit each other, and they end up doing this sort of conga thing with it's a really funny episode. I love Luis Avalos. I wish he was still with us, but you can see that comes across, and that's something to think about. If you're and it doesn't, you got to be sincere about it. You can't just go flapping your arms and fake it being nice to people, but you got to find something to be positive about. And not everything's going to go your way. Most things won't go your way. Biggest mistake is belaboring it, talking about it over and over again. I mean, I'm giving you advice that.
No, I love it. No,
I knew.
I love it.
I wish I knew it when I was younger.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
It's very appreciated. And you're just don't overthink it, right? Like, it didn't go your way. Don't dwell on it, because tomorrow could be something better.
Tomorrow could be something, and the person that you talked to 6 months ago may call you out of the blue and say, "Are you still interested in this thing?" Well, there's this thing, and then you go to do the thing, and it's like, it's this thing, and it could end up to be this other thing, and it's just. And sometimes see if you can get involved in things, voluntarily. It's tricky with volunteer work. I mean, maybe in a professional setting, if you're college, Internships, they're very precious now, because internships put you right into the boiling water of production. But if you also get exposed to the production process, and you find out whether or not you like it. That's a whole other thing. You can change your mind. No one's going to mind if you change your mind. It's like, gee, this wasn't right for me. Maybe this other thing will be.
That makes sense. I did want to ask you before we get out of here. You wrote for Tom and Jerry. How cool was that? Like, we have to talk about that, or I killed
it. Writing for Tom and Jerry was just like writing for Archie. When you write for Archie, I don't think they take freelance anymore because I jump on it. I'm always asking. But back in the day, they had an editor named Victor Gorelick, and you'll see the name Victor pop up a lot in the comics because they must have loved Victor. And he knew every comic book. When I told him I had written the letter, he remembered the comic book. That was it. Anyway, he knew everything they'd done. And Archie has been around for 80 years, and they've done thousands of stories. And that's why Archie's so great, because they can somehow find twists on the same stories. The characters are just eternal. But you got to come up with something that's somewhat fresh. Don't do any shopping ones. We got too many of those. Don't do any diet ones. We can't do any more of those. But try to see what the latest trends is. You'll also notice in Archie stories, if rollerblading has become a thing, you do it. He said, look what the trend is, especially on the West Coast. What are kids doing? Work that into a story. My favorite Archies, though, are the character ones where you actually find a way to play with what you know about the character. For example, I wrote one where Miss Grundy, for a drama exercise, had each of them switch personalities, sort of Freaky Friday, which, by the way, has been done on Gilligan and been done on Flintstones, and that's been done since vaudeville. But what makes Freaky Friday unique is it's the mother-daughter relationship. That's the key. Well, Betty had to pretend to be Veronica and vice versa. Archie had to pretend to be Reggie. Moose had to pretend to be Dilton. Jughead, I'm trying to remember. I think he was the judge.
Okay.
And it was so much fun having them do what they thought the other person was like. Betty's going, I'm so shallow. I just want to buy things. And, maybe I can torture Archie. And Veronica's like, la, la, la. I want to go help people and I want to spread sunshine. That's fun. When you sell a story, which is real hard, the story writes itself because the characters are living,
Sure.
Same thing with Tom and Jerry. You have to come up, and there's a huge race to do it. They say, okay, here's the rules. Here's what we need. And the rules change. You submit lists and lists and lists of concepts. And then they say either someone got it in before you, or we've done it, or business affairs says we can't show this, or we can't have that. Or because of the nature of the animation, this will require too many new backgrounds. We have to have backgrounds. It's like writing for Filmation.
Got it. Yeah.
You have to know, you can't put a lot of original art into it. You've got to have functional things. It's like they used to call it a bottle show, where they stayed where they were. So I wrote I wrote a lot of them, and I wrote a lot of treatments where you do the beats. But the hockey jockeys was in the house, so it worked. And I thought they never did air hockey, as far as I know, with Tom and Jerry. And immediately my mind went back to one of my favorites, which is Mice Follies, where they freeze the entire kitchen and have an ice show. I think that's what makes Tom and Jerry great. It's so elegant and tasteful and beautiful, and yet it's savagely violent. And Tom fails so miserably at the end when the water, what's going to happen, but you can't wait. But so there was that sort of Sleeping Beauty kind of thing going, because they're going, and then of course Tom makes them into pucks, and then Spike comes in and does the same thing to Tom, and it ends up going outside and stuff, and they run it. I think they don't know if you can stream it, but they run it on Boomerang. And as I said, there are plenty of others. Same thing with Adventures in Odyssey. I wrote some things for that, and they paid me for the treatments. It's real hard to get one on the air, though. It's like SNL. It's hard to get a sketch on the air. And
Got it.
And there's a lot of writers who are scribbling away when you are to do it. But what a thrill. And I'm telling you, Daryl Van Sitters is a prince among men. Daryl was the guy who did Showbiz Bunny. You know, he did some of those great Warner, redo ones.
Sure.
He also originated the Roger Rabbit concept at Disney, and had done the. You can see the test footage with Peter Renaday playing Eddie Valiant, and I think Russi Taylor. Yeah, Russi Taylor is the voice of Jessica, and those were the original pitch sketches and animation. And they liked the idea so much that Spielberg came in and took the whole concept, and Daryl didn't do it. And I said, "How do you get over that?" He says, "You don't. You just move on."
Fair, yeah, totally fair.
But Daryl's cartoons, the Mr. Men cartoon, the Tom and Jerry series, the Tom and Jerry in Hollywood, they have that snap that he is so inspired by UPA and Jay Ward that you see the line treatments, you see the background treatments. They look so crisp, and even when they're done with Flash or whatever the current thing, they still have that they look like animation. He does what he can with what he has, and it's beautiful stuff. And I'm very proud to be part of it.
That's awesome. I do want to ask you, because I think we're coming up on time, but what do you have coming up? Anything that you really want to speak to or like talk about that we haven't covered, or anything you were trying to like put out into the world in terms of coming projects?
Well, there's a lot of things I can't talk about.
Okay.
And I do have books in the works that are approved by the press. As soon as you do them, we'll go with them. Actually 3 concepts. I am teaching multiple classes year round at various colleges, either online or in person. In the LA area, I'll teach in person. I did a Flintstones presentation at USC Irvine, and a Hanna-Barbera hour at Pitzer College, and I've done some. They're either 6 weeks, 3 weeks, or a one shot. So far, I've done many of the Hanna-Barbera 6-week programs. I did a Christmas specials one last year, 2 weeks of Rankin Bass on that because they did so much. I did how pop music, TV changed pop music. The Monkees and the all those groups that somehow showed up on sitcoms, and why that was. And then I did escapism. This is a kind of a fun set. If you think about it, the 60s were the central nucleus of the most escapism concentrated in one decade. I mean, the 70s had plenty of it too, and it had Star Wars. But I'm talking about wacky, outlandish fantasy, supernatural, people disappearing and appearing, cars that flew, nuns that flew, cars that were somebody's mother, and one brother's an angel. I mean, and Mr. Ed, and it was, and there is a connection between Walt Disney, Hanna-Barbera, and what happened in the 60s, because as I explained, they were getting a cartoon result with live action, and so was Walt Disney in live action. Suddenly, Absent-Minded Professor could have been cartoon characters, but doing it in a black and white film cost way less, and those movies made a ton of money. So then he had to go in between. Okay, we'll do Mary Poppins, we'll do Jungle Book, but we'll also do Monkeys Go Home and Merlin Jones, and lovely films, but certainly, and usually the same people who made them. Love Bug was the same staff.
Yeah.
And a great movie. So, it was that, all of that was the 60s. I mean, and it was a fascinating decade. And so I talked about what led up to it and what came up with it. And my next class for Florida State, which is an online 3-week class, and you can visit their site and find out how they do it. Actually, there's several classes, and they're kind of fun. They're for 55 and older. And we've got one guy who does comedy things where he knows so much about it. My friend Mike Lyons, who's another historian, does things. And you sign up for that, and then you pick the classes you want. Mine is going to be about the various film and television, primarily versions of A Christmas Carol. And I'm going to go back. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Magic Lantern days, because Magic Lantern was theater. It was like a movie theater in those days, and they had special effects and some stage and some radio, some recording, but mostly what film and television did, because it's one of the most adapted stories in the history of humankind. And I'm going to go all the way up probably to the Jim Carrey one. I think I'll stop there. You know, a bunch of musicals and things. And I'm going to try. I haven't yet put the programming together, but there are so many versions that you could literally tell the story like through silent movies by taking a cut out of each silent movie.
Sure.
Each sequence in. So I'm trying to do that. And plus I've been studying the book, because what's in the book, what's not in the book, what's in the book that no one mentions. You know, I just learned something interesting the other day when Scrooge hollers out the window and asks the boy to get the turkey. He says, "Go get it." And he says, and the boy goes, in Mr. Magoo, he goes, "Walker." And I'm like, what's that mean? And turns out that the phrase is like Walker, and it comes from some name, and it's slang for, you know, you got to be kidding me, or tell me another one. So it's kind of a sarcastic phrase, but for years I've heard Walker, and I had no idea what he was saying.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite version?
I have two. I have the Magoo and the Albert Finney Scrooge. I have a very soft spot for The Stingiest Man in Town, because it was done in 1956. Originally, Rankin Bass remade it in '79 with Walter Matthau, but I'm partial to the original with Basil Rathbone, because Tutti Camerata was the musical director, and this music is so good in that. Yeah. And I love that. And I also I think there's that one that John Williams did was quite good. Mickey's Christmas Carol is very good. But if I had to pick, I can't pick one, but I can pick Magoo, and I mean, Magoo's music just cuts right into your soul. Those songs are so good, and it's so accurate, word for word from the book. Yeah. And Scrooge is just, I love Oliver. So Oliver and Scrooge kind of go together. They're brilliant movies.
That's awesome. Anything else you got going on coming up?
Well, the other thing I can't talk about is there may be a couple of media appearances later this year and maybe early next year that people might be able to tune in for, but I don't know. I haven't fully signed anything yet, so I don't want to say because I haven't totally gelled them. But they're both really cool. And
well, when you ink to paper it, please come back on. I would love to talk to you more about all of your stuff. But yeah, anything else you got going on? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's kind of the gist of it. You know what I got to mention is I got to do all my. Because we got the book, we got the Hanna-Barbera book that we talked about. You've seen that, with the little bird on the cover, which and the record-playing bird is the first animal tool character ever on the Flintstones, and this blue design, is based on the Hanna-Barbera label design.
Interesting. Okay.
Of course, this is Mousetracks, the story of Walt Disney Records. This was written and was published in 2006, but it is still in print. And it tells the story of a lot of unknown heroes of ours and a lot of well-known people, Annette and Fess Parker and the Sherman Brothers, but also a lot of people who deserve credit. And because of this book, 3 people became Disney legends. Tutti Camarata, who was the musical director, Jimmy Johnson, who was the president of the record company, and also launched the direct mail division and was responsible for putting together Bob Thomas's Art of Animation book. So he doesn't get a lot of credit for that. But this is Jimmy Johnson's biography, Inside the Whimsy Works. And that, it's glary. That is one of the very first autobiographies by a Disney staff member that was ever written, because inside people didn't write books at the time in the 70s. Hardly anybody wrote books.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, Jimmy Johnson wrote his memoir in 1975, and then he passed away, and it sat in the archives for years. There was nothing wrong with it. They just didn't see any need to publish it, but it needed editing because it had a lot of stream of consciousness and things were out of order. So Didier Guez and I edited it, and it's a really good capsule of what an executive's career is like. I mean, he went all the way back to Snow White and through to Walt Disney World. And he was instrumental in like choosing the music for Country Bear and America Sings, and creating the Wonderland Music Store on Main Street, things like that. So there's that. And then, of course, this is my new pop culture classics podcast. That's runs concurrently with the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera, which has been on now for 3 years. And when I have a guest that isn't really Hanna-Barbera related, then they put them on the pop culture podcast. I just had 3. What did I have? I had the two of the sons of Lee Mendelson, who was the producer of the Peanut specials, and they're releasing record albums with the original soundtrack music, which is I couldn't have wished they would do this.
Yeah, that's awesome. For sure.
Yeah, they're really, really wonderful. And so they came on to talk about the project, talk about their dad and his history, and Charles Schultz, because they were all friendly. The families all got together. Vince Guaraldi and all those people. So he was on. In future, I'm going to be having another Hanna-Barbera artist and a voice actor and a gentleman who was the son of Harry Ackerman, who was the producer of the aforementioned Bewitched, Flying Nun, Father Knows Best, all of these cool sitcoms from the 60s and early 70s, and what kind of guy he was. And he was very close to his dad. And his mother was Eleanor Donahue, who was Princess.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
On Father Knows Best. And so that's kind of cool. And he tells a lot of the story, but he has a book that's on Amazon that tells that story too. His name is Peter K. Ackerman. So those are coming down the pike. Lots going on. It's I'm juggling getting these. I like to edit them nicely and get them ready to put them on so they're nice and pristine. So sometimes it takes a while to get them on the air. But I like them to be to sound like little documentaries. So.
Sure. No, I'm excited to hear that. Have you enjoyed podcasting? Have you done it a long time? Sorry to like deviate from any of the thing, but like I would like to hear your experiences podcasting.
I actually always wanted to, and I had done radio in the past. I produced and sometimes hosted a talk show at Walt Disney World because they had a radio studio there and they had celebrity guests. And sometimes when the host didn't show, I would interview people, and so I'm comfortable doing that. And so it's kind of like radio to me, and it's become really an incredibly satisfying experience because doing this kind of history, you're releasing information out to everyone that's largely unknown.
Sure.
So I feel like it's the sort just like the books, especially Hanna-Barbera, because you can watch MeTV Tunes now and use the book as a map, and you'll know what year these things came out and what their contexts were, what their circumstances were, and it all kind of makes sense when you see them as one big blast and aren't quite sure what year and where Hanna-Barbera was at the time. It just enhances the enjoyment. So between that, and then I've had the president of MeTV on several times talking about their programming, the narrators of the audiobooks of my books, they because all the books are on audio now, talking about how do you do that, and then people from the shows, like the voice of Alexandra and Wendy, one of the Wonder Twins on
That's fun.
Alexandra and Josie and the Wonder Twin, and she was also a Mouseketeer. And then she was great. We had Rosemary, the telephone operator, Kathy Gorey from Hong Kong Food. She was a hoot. She was a blast. A lot of people who have very touching stories to tell. The son of Gene Vanderpyle, the voice of Wilma and Pebbles, his relationship with his mom. You find out these people, just like Dawes Butler's son talks about him, and Henry and John Stevenson. These people were really wonderful people, and they were very close to their kids, and the kids have very fond memories. That kind of story is just so nice to be able to share. And then once in a while we'll do a deep dive. I'll have like a historian like Jim Fanning on, and we'll talk about Huckleberry Finn. Well, and I thought, well, how much are we going to say? And it ended up being almost 90 minutes. We did a Wacky Races I haven't run yet.
Oh, that's so fun.
That was with Dave Pruxma, who was a master animator at Disney, but was also a huge fan. Nick Ranieri, another, he animated Lumiere. He was, we did a thing on Johnny Quest because he co-produced the soundtrack album.
Yeah.
That came out. So sometimes we just celebrate a show that we love, and talk about why. Mike Lyons and I took 2 Flintstone episodes and went through and why are these important episodes and what is it about them? And so we do that sometimes too. It really is. And as you you don't do this so you can buy a villa in the Florentines.
Yeah, 100%.
You do it if there is the Florentines. I don't even.
Yeah, that's right.
No, you do it so you can. Mostly, I just want to buy eggs. I'm happy if I can.
The
buy
6-pack eggs, though.
Yeah. Don't go near the 18s. It's just because you love this so much, and the more you learn about it, and you learn about, you're going to find out negative things, and you sometimes fly too close to the sun, and that kind of thing. But by and large, what you find out is like Hanna-Barbera was really, they were all about keeping their people employed of all ages. They hired young people. They hired old people who were too sick to be hired anywhere else. Their main, and Mark Evanier, this is in the book, Mark Evanier tells this great story about asking Bill Hanna, you spread yourself so thin with these shows. What if you just didn't do one and put a little more into the others? He said, okay, Mark, look over there at the layout department and tell me who to fire. Yeah. That was their philosophy, because they never got over the MGM thing. They thought they were going to stay for 20 years more. They were there for 20. They're going to be for another 20. They were winning Oscars like crazy, more than Meryl Streep. And they loved it. They were perfectly happy. It really, even though it was kind of in the wind, they didn't think it was real. Nobody thinks it's really going to happen. And it did. And everybody was gone.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was like, how do we feed our families? How do our people feed their families and help their kids go to school and buy a car and all? Okay, that wasn't necessarily how can we do the greatest art that ever was. They still did. To me, they really did, because if you look at what they did under those circumstances, it is awesome and incredible, because the speed and the pressure and the various groups telling them this can't be violent and this is this and this is this, and the networks putting pressure and the sponsors putting pressure, and everybody having a say. Look how good the cartoons are. Nevertheless, it's why I like Charlotte's Web so much, because to me, Charlotte's Web may have physical flaws in it. I love the flaws. It feels like a handmade illustrated moving film that tells a story that just touches you, gives you, it's sad, but it's hopeful. It's about life. It's about media. And it looks the way it looks, and it's a Hanna-Barbera look under an enormous amount. They were making shows like crazy while they turned this thing out with a score that you'll never forget. And yet they did it. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I think it's perfect.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Greg, sir, I could talk to you for another 2 hours, I think. But I'd love to have you back on. But I do think we have to end it here. But any social medias you want to plug before we get out of here?
Yeah, I've got gregovision.com. I got the 2 podcasts. I've got a page for each podcast if you want to ask questions or comment or anything. I've got my own Facebook page. People are very nice on it. And if please, the nicest thing is, I mean, people have said very nice things about the podcast. I guess you subscribe, you like, this. Subscribe and
please
like.
do all the things for Greg, please.
Do those things that make the Spotify's and all those happy, because you get little graphs and stuff. And I'm not, this is a very specialized thing, but I cherish the group that does it, because I know we're all like loving this stuff together. And what more could you want? Talking about what you love and giving credit to people who either have always earned it and deserved it, or never got it and are long overdue to get it. That's the way I feel.
I couldn't say it better myself. Thank you, sir, so much for being here. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
See ya.